When I was in high school, I wanted to do something different with my life. It had to be, looked like teaching. Sometimes my mind was scattered all over the place. I wanted to be even in aviation because my brother was a pilot and his dad was a pilot. It literally had changed my life. But there was a couple things that happened even previously to that even caused a more significant change in my life that would dominate my life up until now. And that was a kid in junior high that would carry his Bible around school. This is public school. He'd carry his Bible around and just talk to people about Jesus. And my friend, he wasn't the popular kid in school. He wasn't the athlete. He wasn't even the jock. He was a kid who simply just loved Jesus and invited all sorts of people to the table with him. So I would go to the lunchroom, and there would be 8 people around this table just sitting with him. And I think to this day, all 8 of those people follow Jesus. From the kid that was an atheist, to the kid that played the French horn, to me, who grew up in a single-family household. It was a really powerful time. And so up until that time, I remember in 11th grade, very specifically, I trusted Christ as my Savior. I recognized that my own sin wouldn't save me. Nothing would ever get me out of that. Nothing would ever top that. Nothing would ever fix me. So something had to fix me. Something had to make it all right, and that was Jesus. I remember walking up during a crusade. An evangelist had come through town, and his name was Dave Reaver. And I remember just really feeling that tug to walk up that aisle and trust Christ. Now, from that point, I knew like something had been working in my heart. Something had been shifting me and changing me and working me. And so the Spirit of God was just like a knife, just gutting me in and out. And what I wanted to do from that point forward was ministry and mission. I had no idea what that looked like. I just knew I wanted to go do something. I'd been on a couple trips. I'd been to Ukraine. I'd been to Mexico serving in some sister church relationships that we had. I went to, after school was done, at high school, I went to 2 years of community college. I realized very quickly that community college was really hard for me. I wasn't the best student. So I went through 2 years of that. I finished in the summer. So I had to take summer school in order to get that 2-year degree. And even at that time, I was trying to still figure things out. And I worked at a camp in the Rockies at 10,000 feet. So I was trying to like really dive in and figure out what I'm going to do with my life. So I served at a camp in the Rockies for 10 months. Up there, it was amazing. It was solitude. And the crazy thing with that is my wife will say this about me, as I'm an extreme extrovert and love people and want to be around people all the time. I want to have like hundreds of friends. And up there was complete solitude. And I remember up there, I'd met another friend, and she was like, you know what? You should apply to Moody. She's like, literally, apply to Moody. I'm like, amazing. A free school? Still didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied to Moody. So I got to Moody and was there, and I started off in education, eventually moved over into urban ministry, and loved it. And after we were done, I still didn't know what to do. So I threw out a fleece, in a sense, right? I was like, I can either be a youth pastor or I can be a worship pastor. So I threw up both. And we ended up in this small town in Minnesota for 10 years as a worship pastor. My wife, lovingly by my side, sacrificing a lot of her even ambitions and dreams so we could raise a family and get after it. She's a saint. And it was during that time when we were just starting to figure things out. We weren't even making much money, and I picked up a camera for the first time, and it was because of my wife. She introduced me to it. She said, we both kind of realized that I wasn't going to make that much money in this life if I was going to continue to be a pastor, so we needed to have some secondary income. And she taught me the camera. She taught me photography. She taught me everything I knew. And so we fast forward out of Winona. We had left Winona, spent a year in Michigan serving at a church with some friends there, and then we moved to Chicago. And in some ways, during that 10 years, I was living this life of still not knowing what I wanted to do. I was a pastor, but somehow this DNA that was formed in me back with my buddy I sat at the junior high table, it was relentless on me. I felt this burden to continue to love on people, to continue to meet people who just didn't know Jesus. And that did know Jesus. I just wanted to be around tons of people. And so we moved to Chicago, and everything falls apart. I lost my job as a pastor. Everything changed in an instant. Our life was different. My identity that had been that for 10 years of sacrifice and working in the church was different. So the only thing I knew to do at that point was pick up a camera and even pick up a mobile phone, and I started taking pictures. I met hundreds of friends through Instagram in Chicago, and I grew a following on Instagram of friends, of people that I could reach out to in any city that we wanted and just to meet people. And so this platform changed. My identity was starting to kind of, even my work identity was starting to be a bit reformed. And in that time, I started asking myself this question: why do we keep things in our identity so secret? You see, the struggle for me for so long was I wanted to pastor. I love pastoring. I love people. I thought that's what I needed to do. But the reality is I really wanted to love on all sorts of people from all walks of life. And in some ways, in the church, that was difficult for me to do. Because as a pastor, you're called to shepherd and love on that flock. And in most cases, you're supposed to spend 80 to 90% of your time to do that. Well, the problem with that is that doesn't leave you much room outside of that to even hardly be with your family. Or even more, let alone trying to hang out with people in the neighborhood and outside. It's difficult. So during my last year, when I was in my pastoral work, I met a guy. His name was Larry. I want to tell you about Larry because this is such an important part of the story. And I believe this point in my life was this was that pivotal moment where things changed, and I realized that God did not have for me that work anymore, which was the pastorate. So I met Larry through a Craigslist ad. My first guitar I bought at Moody while I was at Moody. We were serving up on the north side. I loved it. But I always wanted this other guitar that a friend of mine had played for me. So I finally found it. I was looking through eBay. I was looking through Craigslist, trying to figure out where this thing is. And you'd see him pop up once in a while. And here it was. It was down in Chesterton, Indiana. Larry and I, he was the owner of this guitar, decided to meet halfway. And I remember going to see him that day, and I brought some cash with me. I brought another instrument, and I met him. Larry was a country singer. He wrote his own music. He was a guy that in his music, you could tell he was always searching for something. He was asking the questions that you guys just dream of hearing, wanting to answer. Where am I going to go? I'm searching for something. And so that day, we couldn't agree on a price. And we both literally walked away from each other. About a month later, I emailed him back and I said, Larry, I love that guitar. Do you still have it? I was wrong on the price. I'll come and get it from you right now. He's like, nope, I sold it to someone else. And that was it. It was a one-line email. It's like, oh, yeah, he's a little upset with me. So 2 months later after that, I get an email from him, and he says, Craig, I still have the guitar. And he's like, I didn't sell it to you for two reasons. One is I really liked how it sounded, and two, you lowballed me. And I was like, why are you even emailing me right now? I don't deserve this. I would soon find out. See, Larry wasn't keeping his secret, right? Larry had just told me in a phone call that he had terminal stage 4 lung cancer. He was going to die. And in that first phone call, he was asking me all sorts of questions because he knew at that time in my life I was a pastor. And I talked to him on the phone for a little bit. But more so, my son and I, we picked up a Bible. We went down and drove back to Chesterton. Drove to his place this time, not halfway. Met with him and his son in a restaurant. And we sat down and we talked to him about Jesus. We talked to him, where he might go at the end of his life. We shared the gospel with him. And so Larry, he was just wide-eyed, wondered. He just couldn't believe this. And we talked about trying to get him to Chicago to play a show. We wanted to get some more time together. But a few months later than that, I get a call from him at about 10 at night on a Monday. And he sounded very, I don't know how to explain it. I've never talked to a dying man up until this point. But there was a lot of distress in his voice. There was this, it's not even anticipation, but this in his voice. He just didn't know how much time he had left, but he knew it was coming fast. And I said, Larry, how much time do you have left? He's like, I have about a week. And I said, okay, I'm going to try to get down there in 24 hours. So I told him that. The next morning, he passed away. He was gone. I didn't know what to do. At that point, what happened? Who had the last conversation with him? Who's talking to you about Jesus when he's on his deathbed? So my son and I, we drive down to the funeral, and we get there, and we meet all sorts of people. Everybody's like, "Oh, you got this guitar," because everybody else wanted it. I'm like, "Yo, I bought it from him, right?" So we sit down for the funeral, and this woman gets up to talk about it, give the eulogy, and minister to us, and all that. And at one point, she said during the talk, she said this: "I'm not allowed to talk about the end of his life and what he said because of confidentiality." I wanted to get up and scream. I wanted to say, "He's dead. It doesn't matter. Let him, please talk. I want to know. I want to know what happened to him." She wouldn't. My son's crying next to me. I'm tearing up. At one point, she said, but she knew this guy from Chicago, and that was me. And so I don't know what kind of, in the moment, I was horrified because I didn't know if all his questions were answered. I don't know what she said to him. At the end of the day, I just had to trust that God had used all sorts of gospel stories in my life and what I shared with him and talking to him about Jesus and the end of his life for him to believe. And that's where that hope is. I don't know if he trusted or not. I don't know if he confessed or not. That's hard stuff. But in that moment, shortly after, I realized that I wanted to be in a place in this world where there would be no more secrets. There would be no more, not speaking about deathbed confessions. There would be more people in this world, like my buddy at the junior high table, that was fearless and relentless with the gospel. And I realized in my life, that was me. I had this DNA imprinted on me from way, way, way back here in junior high that I had literally ignored all the way through up until 2 years ago. It's not like those years were a waste by any means. Learned a ton. There's all sorts of, God had used trials and tribulations to shape my family and I in ways that we could write books about. But now, there's no more of that secret life anymore that I have to keep tucked away. Because now I have a platform and an opportunity to live amongst people every day in the marketplace and talk to them about Jesus and share the story of Larry. It's amazing sharing that story with people. They hear it, they can relate. A woman at one point literally said that 3 days later, she's like, that story has shook me. These are just people in the market. These are everyday people. And I wonder, as people of faith, and I wonder how much are we living in secret? How much are we keeping these dreams or keeping these stories tucked back here to not share with everybody? Are we doing that? My guess is we do it more than we think. Whether you are doing professional pastoral ministry or you're in a nonprofit, ministry is the same as it is here, as it is in the workplace, and there's opportunities galore to share the best news that anyone will ever hear. Thank you.